Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I was just reading. No book in particular. I'll just set that down right here. Right there is good. Yeah. Okay, so welcome to tonight's BookTrib live chat. I am so excited to have you here tonight. I'm Veronica, your host and moderator for this evening. I'm coming to you live from the BookTrib headquarters. As you can see, I've got loads of fun books behind me, and you can win some of these books if you head on down to booktrib.com and sign up. It is free and it's easy, and we'll just send you information about whatever's going on in our amazing book lovers community, from blog tours to live chats to giveaways. You'll get all the information you need there. And now to the good stuff. We are lucky enough to be joined tonight by Mark Rubinstein. He has an incredibly interesting background. He's a forensics psychiatrist, an expert witness, a clinical psychiatrist, and a psychological thriller writer. And he comes to us tonight to discuss his new book and the fine line between falling in love and madness in fiction and in real life. I'm sure you all have heard of the headlines, from Anthony Weiner to Jodi Arias to the latest Hollywood breakups. Mark actually writes for the Huffington Post and Psychology Today, so head on down over there to check out some of his incredible thoughts. And now to the book. I'm sure you've all have heard the phrase, hell hath no fury like a lover crossed, especially if that love was an unrequited obsession. Name them: Fatal Attraction, Misery, Taxi Driver, Jagged Edge, a personal favorite of mine, Swim Fan, Sleeping with the Enemy. All classic movies involving love and obsession. That's just a little bit about what you'll find in Love Gone Mad, which is Mark's second novel. His first novel is Mad Doghouse, which happens to just be behind me right there. Check out his website to find out more about that book. Anyway, Love Gone Mad. It follows the story of heart surgeon Adrian Douglas and RN Megan Haggarty. They meet in the hospital where they both work. However, this isn't your average meet and fall in love story. Frightening and terrifying things start happening to them both, and they quickly realize that someone is after them. And the stalker is not only brilliant and crafty, but vows to exact revenge for the ultimate betrayal. So without any
Hi, and thanks for that
Hi,
introduction.
Mark.
Hi,
Can you hear me? See me?
the sound is,
Good.
I'm doing the best I can.
I can't seem to hear you.
Are you hearing me?
Here we go. Oh, I hear you. Yes.
Okay, and now I hear you.
Perfect. So if you wouldn't mind maybe telling everyone about a little bit about yourself, maybe some things I didn't cover,
Well,
and we can get to it.
I didn't really hear everything you said, so I don't know what you covered, but all I can say is I'm a nice guy, and I love to write, and I love to write thrillers, because thrillers ask the ultimate question of any reader: what's going to happen next? And that's what I love to write about, something that will take over and grab you by the neck and squeeze a little bit and make you wonder suspensefully what's going to happen to this poor fellow or girl who's in a terrible bind. So that's all I'm going to tell you about the book
Kind
myself.
of like love and obsession, right?
Yes, love and obsession, and love gone mad.
Exactly. Okay, so let's put the first question on screen. Here's one.
I see one from Darlene Peterson. Your profession makes writing a thriller a logical choice. But were there any authors of books who inspired your choice to go for the thriller? Well, Darlene, I have to say that there are certain authors who I've been drawn to almost from the first time that I read one of their books. One of them was Barry Eisler, and still is. I've read every single book, particularly the John Rain books that he's written. And another is Don Winslow. Don Winslow is a guy who writes in a very highly stylized way, oftentimes about the drug trade down in Southern California, but his writing is so unique and unusual that I have to say that they were instrumental in my deciding really that I would love to write thrillers. But even more than that, they always say write what you know. Steve Berry would say write what you love. I would have to go with the latter. I love to write about things, and I love to write the kind of book that I would love to read. And I love to be captured by a novel and to read something that's going to make me wonder what every little kid wonders when you're reading, when the child is being told a story. What happens next? And I think that's the essence of any thriller, and that's what really made me decide to begin writing thrillers. So I hope I've answered the question. Let's see, we have when did you first know you wanted to be an author? That's submitted by Marjorie Takala. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Well, I would have to say I really had fantasies about writing, going back to basically my childhood. I was a voracious reader, and I read voraciously, and I lived vicariously. When I was just a kid, I was reading Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan books. I also read extensively Edgar Allan Poe, Jack London, the typical things I guess you'd expect from a kid to read. But I really had other priorities in terms of ultimately having to work and earn a living. So I did various things and ultimately became a physician and then a psychiatrist. But the bottom line was that I always loved hearing and telling stories. And one thing that's very clear in psychiatry is that you really listen to people who tell you their stories. And that was always a very, it was tremendous gratifying experience for me to listen to people tell me their stories. And of course, this impacted me. And when I would present case histories at seminars as a resident and at case conferences, people would tell me, you know, when you present a case, it sounds like a novel. Then I ended up writing, co-authoring 5 nonfiction self-help medical books, breast cancer, heart disease, child development, things like that. And we had to provide case histories to illustrate certain points that we're making. And in providing the case histories, we had to really tell a little bit of a story, and we changed the patient's name, of course, and we did all kinds of things. And I loved writing that stuff so much that I even gave these people dialogue in what was really just supposed to be an illustration or a case history. So I guess that was the beginning, and I always knew I wanted to write, and at some point I decided I'm going to make that come true, and that's what I've been doing. Um, is what's going to happen next the reason you decided to write using the present tense? That's Mina DeCaro. Well, deciding to write in the present tense, I might add or insert really that the next novel that I'm working on after the third one coming out is going to be written in the traditional past tense in the first person. The third one, which is called Mad Dog Justice, is also written in the present tense, third person. I didn't really consciously or willfully choose to do that. What really happened was that I found the the writing of what I was trying to describe or tell, or the dialogue and the interaction, it so captured me that it seemed more immediate. There was an immediacy to it by using the present tense. And many people have said in reading what I write that it's very visual. And some reviewers and critics on Amazon and elsewhere have said basically, I felt like I was watching a movie on paper. And I guess the visual element is what attracts me so much. I try to create scenes or dialogue or a chase scene or whatever so that the reader has the feeling and hears and sees and even hopefully smells what the person being described hears, thinks, smells, and feels. And I guess it's the immediacy of the present tense that draws the reader in. Some people feel a little off-put at first when they open a book and it's in the present tense because it's not typically what authors use. But I've found by talking with people that they quickly get sucked into the present tense, and within a couple of pages, they're right into it. And it really doesn't matter. Perhaps it registers on some pre-conscious or unconscious level as having that immediacy, that nowness that I think is so valuable and so important for a thriller to have. There are some other writers who do that. Don Winslow does that. Uh, the City of Thieves is a wonderful book. Not City of Thieves, The 25th Hour is a book that's also written in the present tense, and I found that extremely compelling. Um, the author's name slips my Benioff, David Benioff. So there's no single reason. It just is something that I slipped into. Um, Andrew Massey wants to know, do you carry around a notebook for when you have writing ideas? I don't. I really don't. I really am a believer in the unconscious and the preconscious. That is to say, I think everything that we see, we think, we hear, everything that we process in our daily lives somehow or other gets mixed in and melded internally. And I, for one, think that if I let things stew inside for a while, they will come out in some crazy amalgam and perhaps will come out and start telling a coherent story. I have lost the visual on this, so I can see no further questions. Okay, we're back on. So I don't carry a notebook. I don't take notes. I don't write down ideas. I just let things kind of marinate in my mind. Okay. Melly says, I bought your books and read them in a night. I just can't put them down. Wow, Melly. Okay. Do you have a favorite part in either Love Gone Mad or Mad Dog House, or a scene that was your favorite to write? Hmm. Do I have, I think every author loves his characters. You have to love them, even the hateful ones. You have to love the people you create. Is there a favorite scene in Mad Dog House? Mad Dog House is the story of Roddy Dolan and Danny Burns, two former tough guys from Brooklyn who became very successful upper middle class people, a surgeon and an accountant, who get into a lot of trouble. The scene that I really enjoyed writing, and I must confess, I was so taken with what was going on in my mind and on the computer screen as I was writing that as I was writing, I actually ended up standing up and typing. I was so carried away. The scene where Roddy finds out that his then, I think, 8-year-old or 9-year-old daughter was approached by a man on the street who was associated with certain mob elements and who gave her a message for him and bent down and kissed her. What he goes through, where as I was writing, I could almost visualize the smoke coming out of his ears. And someone told me that I really hit my crescendo, my apotheosis in writing that scene. I guess scenes of anger. The scene from Love Gone Mad that, well, I have a couple of favorites. One is when Megan and Adrian first meet in the cafeteria. I tried to write that first in one chapter point of view or POV. Adrian, where he sees this gorgeous woman who has no ring on her finger. He's instantly attracted and he says, oh, boy, she won't give me a second's glance. And she doesn't. She's looking down and she's reading from Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. And he thinks that, and he's staring directly at her and he's trying to make eye contact with her, but she won't have any of it. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Adrian, as he was approaching the table, she looked him up and down and decided that he was what they used to call in high school a real hunk. And she's wondering if he's one of these. They're wearing nameplates, and he's a cardiac surgeon, and she's wondering if he's a surgical cowboy like all the others. And that was one favorite scene. Another one is a graveyard scene that occurs where there's some real thrilling stuff going on. I won't get into it beyond that. I hope I've answered your question, Mally. Okay, Darlene Peterson wants to know, I often choose a book by its cover, and I like yours. Did you have a lot of input in the choice of yours? I did. I had a good deal of input in it. A very talented artist, by the way, his name is Sam Quo. Uh, did 5 different renderings of the cover for Love Gone Mad. He also did the cover for Mad Dog House. Very creative, artistic fellow. And he presented me with these 5 choices. And of the 5, the one that's the cover of the book now is the one that I chose. He's a very interesting guy. And the way he approaches it is he reads the manuscript, and after having done so, he thinks about it for a while, and he tries to come up with some visual image that is going to either capture the book, if you can, in its entirety, or on the other hand, capture some important element of the book so that it signals the prospective reader something that's contained within the 2 covers of the book. It gives you some impactful idea of what's to come. And I think he succeeded very nicely with Love Gone Mad. It's kind of mysterious. It's ominous. The hoodie, or the anorak as it's called, the blank face, the darkness, even the script he chose to use, written, by the way, in what I guess approximates blood red, uh, and looking sort of like the script of perhaps a demented or mad individual. So yes, I had a choice in it, and I think that if you leave it to a professional, someone who really has literally a hand in this kind of thing, more so than you do. Although, as the author, you want to have a say in this. And I know I interviewed Barry Eisler last week, and he was talking about having decided to go independent, and he didn't like the fact that he had so little control over his books, over the choice of covers and the titles and so forth. And he took steps. Of course, he's Barry Eisler. He can do whatever he wants, and he's very successful. But if you're lucky, you have an illustrator, you have an editor, you have people who are simpatico with you, and they come up with things that really fit into the way you conceptualize your own creation. Um, Hashtag Books wants to know, what was the most memorable case you worked on while you were a forensic psychologist? Well, I was a psychiatrist. There is a difference, but for the purposes of this, it doesn't matter. Has your well-rounded background helped you to create such interesting and elaborate novels? Uh, it's hard to pick up with a memorable case, the most memorable, the single most memorable. I should say that in the course of the 11 years after 9/11, I ended up evaluating more than 300 survivors of 9/11, of that horrendous day. These were people who were in the office in the Twin Towers early that morning, going about their usual day's work. And they were in the North and South Towers on the day when the 2 airplanes hit the respective buildings. And I ended up, over the course, as I said, of the next 11 years, interviewing more than 300 of them. And the horror stories that I heard about what they saw, what they smelled coming down the stairways, the stairwells filling up with smoke, becoming choke points really for the streams of people coming into the stairwell from as they descended lower and lower. By about the 20th floor, having seen the faces of firefighters running up, young men who they, of course, later learned never survived. None of those men survived. Those were all memorable cases in their own right. There were other cases that involved horrendous scenarios that I was called upon to testify about, in terms of civil court cases where there were damages because of a horrendous car accident. One woman who was a passenger in a car being driven by her sister with her mother and young daughter in the back seat. They were involved in a terrible accident. And in the flash of a moment, she lost her mother, her sister, and her daughter. 3 generations gone in the flash of a moment. I could go on and on about memorable cases. They all helped me in terms of becoming a writer, in that they exposed me to a level of fear, of horror, of catastrophic incidents that are well beyond the realm of ordinary human experience. I can say that as a forensic psychiatrist, I ended up seeing people and situations and working up cases and evaluating people that were far beyond the realm that any regular, ordinary psychiatrist sees. I even evaluated patients in prison. A prisoner who was suing the state of New York because he thought he was inhaling some toxic substance and so forth. I had to literally go to prison in Fishkill, New York, and interview this man in a closed cell. And so I had experiences as a forensic psychiatrist that most psychiatrists don't have, no less other people who are not psychiatrists. So yes, it helped me by virtue of exposure, by virtue of being able to appreciate what people who are undergoing enormous, overwhelming, catastrophic fear of annihilation experience. And I think I try to bring some of that at appropriate times into the novels I write, which I think is part of the essence of the thriller. By the way, I always like to differentiate thrillers from mysteries, and I think many people sort of mix them all together as though they're one genre. And I guess maybe in some sense they are. They're often grouped together: thrillers, mystery, and suspense. Mysteries are basically constructs by an author where there's a puzzle to be solved, and you follow the detective or the police officer, or whether it's a P.D. James book or an Agatha Christie book or whatever, you follow them trying to solve a crime, very often a murder, and there's usually very little, if any, violence involved, and the person goes about ultimately solving the mystery. There are some red herrings and this and that. A thriller, on the other hand, invariably involves not just suspense and to some extent mystery, but also involves imminent danger to the protagonist. Will Roddy survive? Will Danny survive? Will Adrian and Megan in Love Gone Mad, will they survive this ordeal that this rotten guy, this author, is putting them through? And that's part of, I think that's quintessential for a thriller. That being said, the psychiatry has always been helpful to me in understanding people and in exposing me to things. Marjorie Takala would like to know, do I use an outline? Do I prepare an outline before writing? Uh, the answer is yes and no. I do prepare a loose outline, something that's not terribly ornate or detailed, sort of like a roadmap, and I try to follow the roadmap, although I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to end up. Sometimes I kind of think I know where the end is, and I don't know how on earth I'm going to get there. So it's really a mixed bag. What I also find with outlines is they can be, if you get into them very, very elaborately and in a very detailed way, an outline can restrict you. I find that if I have a loose outline and have a sense of where I think I'd like to go, I start to follow it. But let's say by page 20 or 30 of a double-spaced manuscript, I find myself deviating from the outline. Well, that's not so bad. It's not a crime. By page 50 or 60, I may have a scene that's evolved. And, you have to always view a novel as an organic living thing. It can morph and change, grow, shrink. It can do all kinds of things, sometimes not even within your willful or conscious control. So the bottom line is I can get to page 50 or 60, and the novel has then taken a turn away from the outline that I thought was so good. And then I realized that page 20 no longer is consistent with what I've got on page 50 or page 100 or whatever it is, and I have to go back and change that. As a matter of fact, only this morning I had to add a scene to the third novel, Mad Dog Justice, because there was something that was really inadequately explained. So I put in a scene between two relatively minor characters just to clarify for the reader and to enhance something that otherwise might have been left murky. So you try never to marry an outline, never to get wed to it, but you want to have some, at least I want to have some idea of where I'm going. I think different authors take different approaches to this, and I don't think there's any one size fits all response, but that's my approach. I try and have something that will guide me, but it's subject to change. Let's see, someone else. Mina DeCaro again. Did you grow attached to your characters while writing their story? Great question. Mina, I did. I grew attached, very attached to Roddy Dolan in Mad Dog House. There are some elements of me that are in him, although I was never a Golden Gloves boxer. I never had the deprived background he had. But if you can say you fell in love with the character, I can say that. Danny Burns too, a very different kind of character, especially in Mad Dog Justice, the third book, but the second one that's involving Roddy and Danny. Yes, you end up caring about the characters. I have decided that with Mad Dog Justice, I will not continue. I will not turn this into a series. Things will get wrapped up, although there's always a question. And you always want to leave, I think, the readers, you don't want to close all doors. You don't want to leave the reader feeling, well, it's a Hollywood ending. Hollywood endings, on some level, they're gratifying, and on another, they're very hokey. So I want to end it on a realistic note, the way life is. Life can be very vague, and there are no clear-cut answers. But yes, I really care about those characters. It's going to be tough to give them up. By the way, I'm sure many of you who've read Stephen King have enjoyed both the novel Misery and the film Misery, where the character in the movie played by Kathy Bates uh, doesn't want the writer character played by James Caan in the movie to kill off a particular character with whom she's fallen in love, and she threatens to break James Caan's leg, which is already in a cast because she's tending to him and nursing him after he's been in a car accident. Something, by the way, that happened to Stephen King. He was in a terrible car accident, which brings to mind that many writers bring elements of their own lives, their own experiences into their fiction, and sometimes you end up blurring the line between fact and fiction. But yes, and Megan and Adrian, I am very attached to both of them, but they both have to go at the end of the novel because the fourth one, Assassin's Lullaby, is about a totally different character, a writer. So I find different characters keep me fresh and keep it going and keep me interested. They don't get stale. And as attached to them as I may be, you have to give birth to the baby and let it go on its way and be independent. Okay, let's see. Tina, Book Monkey Tina, wants to know one fact that people don't know about you, but they should know. Oh boy, I risk giving away some trade secrets here. Let's see. Well, one fact I didn't have a visual. Or sound when Veronica was introducing me. So I don't know if she mentioned that I have a degree in business administration. You may or may not know that, but I was in business for a while, and I thought it was a terrible waste of my time, and I couldn't see myself spending my life doing that. So I ended up in the Army because in those days the draft was imminent, and the draft board was breathing down my neck. And I ended up randomly being placed in the medical corps at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, tending to paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne. And as a result, I ended up changing my mind about my life's direction, and I went to medical school. I went back to college, took the pre-medical sciences, and was lucky to get into medical school. That being said, as much as I thought the waste of time in business school would never serve me, it does serve me. I developed a certain business savvy, and some of that savvy is, I hope, evident in Mad Dog House, where Danny Burns, who's a CPA and accountant, has to assess a steakhouse, a Manhattan steakhouse, and whether it's a viable venture and something they should buy into, which is the beginning of a lot of trouble for the two protagonists. So that may or may not be something that I don't know how important it is, but it's something about me that contributes to my background and to some extent to some of my writing. Let's see, is there anybody else with a question? I don't see any other questions coming. Here we have hashtag books. Who would you want to play the main characters in Love Gone Mad if it were made into a feature film? As a matter of fact, Love Gone Mad is being, as they say in Hollywood, it's being shopped around right now. And who knows what'll happen. I have an image, and I wasn't writing for this image in terms of the character Adrian Douglas in Love Gone Mad. I do have an image though of Clive Owen. I also had the image of Clive Owen after I finished Mad Dog House. He could play Roddy Dolan. Um, Megan Haggarty, I was thinking when I was asked this question before, um, Kate Blanchett would be a lovely Megan Haggerty, or someone in that vein, someone who has a sweet face, reddish blonde hair, someone who has an almost ethereal look, who's bright, sensitive, somebody who could be a neonatal ICU nurse, because that's a special calling. Um, That's about as much. I actually in Mad Dog House, I also conceptualized Adrian Brody as the fellow who might be suitable to play Kenny Egan, and he looks the part at least as I conceptualized him. And I hadn't really thought terribly much about the other characters. John C. Riley, I think, might make a good Danny Burns, sort of a thick-faced, fleshy Irishman who really very likable. Somebody who you look at instantly, and you sort of know he's a nice guy. So those are some of my fantasies. I mean, I don't know if either one will ever get made into a movie, but if it does, that's the prototype I would imagine playing some of these parts. I'm sorry, Melly wants to know, Mad Dog House and Love Gone Mad both fit into the thriller category. Do you plan on writing any books in another genre? Well, the third one is going to be, as I said, Mad Dog Justice is going to be a thriller. The fourth one, Assassin's Lullaby, about a writer, is going to be, I guess, what people call a legal thriller because of my forensic background, some of which comes out in Love Gone Mad. I do have an affinity for courtroom drama, and I've always found that to be very compelling, especially when you have hostile cross examinations and one witness trying to fend off a very aggressive cross examining attorney, and the fireworks start erupting in court, and the jury is mesmerized very often. And I've been in the hot seat as an expert witness. um, so that's not strictly speaking a thriller. It's sort of in the vein of a Scott Turow type book, but it does have a thrilling element. It does have, let me just intro it by saying that, uh, and this is two books away yet, but Assassin's Lullaby is about a writer who is in the district attorney's crosshairs because his wife, who recently died in a manner similar to what's depicted in one of his novels. And that's enough to raise the antenna on the district attorney. And there we go. And it starts to turn into a very tension filled. Again, will he survive? Will he get past this? Will he be exonerated? Will he be found guilty? Was he guilty? Was he innocent? And so forth. Beyond that, I have a few ideas, and they always say don't mix your genres because a hybrid never does well. But MJ Rose says don't write for the market, write to please yourself. I like to think that some of what I write has some literary quality to it. I like to think it's not a straight shoot 'em and root 'em type thing, that it has some artistic merit. Although if you read reviews, you get all kinds of opinions, and some people say it's beautifully written, others say it's terribly written. And I try always to keep in mind, by the way, that a review is only one person's opinion, and you learn pretty quickly as an author not to take any review terribly seriously. That is, to not take it to heart. If you see a plethora of reviews, all of which have a similar theme, either negative or positive, well, then you might start thinking that there's a certain trend there, and it's worth thinking about. Um, Darlene Peterson, do you have a daily writing routine? Uh, the answer is yes. I believe above all that writing is a very strict discipline. You must be disciplined. The common, almost mythical notion that you wait for inspiration and then you just burst forth with creativity is really a misconception. There are days when I look at the computer monitor and I'm at a loss, literally a loss for words. I'm not sure where the next words are coming from. Sometimes when I finish a chapter, I'm not sure exactly where to go. I've deviated from the outline. But my routine is every morning, barring some unforeseen circumstances, by around 5:30, I'm at the computer. I like to get in a few hours, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 hours. The house is quiet. The dogs are sleeping. The telephone's not ringing. My smartphone is nice and quiet. Um, I try to write every single day, mostly in the morning. Sometimes I'll go back in the afternoon and refashion what I do. Uh, Even if I only get in 15 or 20 minutes of writing or revising in a given day, I feel that I've spent the day in a worthwhile fashion. If a day passes by and I haven't done anything on a script, because of other obligations or whatever it may be that take me away, there's a part of me that feels almost hollow, as though I haven't had a full day, and I won't go to it 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I don't feel fresh enough. For me, the juices really flow early in the morning. Yes, it's a routine, it's a discipline, it's something you have to be strict with yourself about. There's always the temptation to leave it for another time. There's always the temptation to skip ahead, do another, which is not a bad idea. Some writers work that way and then they cut and paste. But I like to just take it to its conclusion down some linear path, even if that path begins to meander and change course during the writing of the novel. Um, Mina again. Hi, Mina. You're my biggest questioner. It's a pleasure. Uh, Mina DeCaro wants to know, as a writer and a psychiatrist, which human behavior fascinates you the most? Oh, oh. Do I sound like I'm on The Sopranos? Oh, because that's what fascinates me most. Greed. The human behavior of greed I find the most compelling and fascinating. Greed, well, there's love, there's jealousy, there's envy, there all the cardinal and mortal sins and all that stuff. But I find greed, which plays a very significant role in Mad Dog House, not one in Love Gone Mad, but I find greed to be a compelling human attribute and behavior. I was once talking to a stockbroker who's trying to sell me something, and I said to him, "Hey, tell me, when is enough enough?" And he said, "Never." And that really summed it up for me. Greed is an incredible human trait, and there are so many people who never have enough, and greed can drive them to do almost insane things that are so, the Martha Stewart routine. Here's a woman who at the time was worth approximately $1 billion and was engaging in a kind of activity that was later deemed to be insider trading for $50,000. I mean, that's greed. It's nothing else. It really didn't have any impact on her financial bottom line, but it's the notion of getting more, of getting it under the wire, of gaming the system. So greed, I think, is to me is the most fascinating. Although certain envy, jealousy, possessiveness, these are things that play pretty big, fairly largely in Love Gone Mad. So I could go on and on. That's Mina, and I'm waiting if anyone else has another question. BookTrib member Jessica Reeds 345 asks, what are some of your favorite TV shows? Okay, well, I've already mentioned The Sopranos. That was, I think, probably the best written series. I think it went on for 7 years. There's barely an episode that was ever boring. It was so well written. It was so true to life. I did a piece for the Huffington Post about James Gandolfini when he died and what he brought to Tony Soprano. I love Breaking Bad, and I'm waiting with bated breath for the last 2 or is it 3 episodes that have yet to come. I think it was a masterful dissection of the inherent greed and of the evil that can lie dormant in people, and which is part of the mainstay of, I think, almost every thriller writer's stable of characteristics. Greed and the notion of evil breaking bad. I'd never even heard that expression until the program came on, and certainly he has broken bad. And if for those of you who are watching the series, I think in the last episode he's trying to break good. He knew that the police were listening into on his phone call to Skylar, his wife, and he really did his best to get her off the hook. I don't see that as having a good ending though, or a happy ending. Let's see some of my other. I enjoyed Seinfeld. I enjoyed very much some elements of the Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm. In its day, Hill Street Blues was wonderful. I enjoyed L.A. Law. Uh, I'm a little hard pressed right now to think of any others, but the two biggies for me recently have been The Sopranos and nowadays Breaking Bad. That's Jessica reads a question, and I'm waiting to see if there's another question I can answer. So far, we're coming up blank here. Ah, Darlene again. Darlene, what do you enjoy doing in your downtime? Oh, I enjoy walking with the dogs. I enjoy playing with them. I enjoy doing some gardening, occasionally eating out in a restaurant, taking long walks either with the dogs or with my wife in the hills near our home, going out with friends, doing the ordinary things that most people do. I read a lot, and I read both within the genre of thrillers and suspense and outside the genre. Some of my favorite authors over the years have been Philip Roth and, as I mentioned, Don Winslow, Barry Eisler. Um, who else? There have been a number of others. Um, God, it all escapes me right now. What else do I do? You say in my downtime. I don't know that a writer ever has downtime. As a psychiatrist, my meter is off the second I walk out of the office. As a writer, it never goes off because I'm always listening. I'm always overhearing snippets of conversation, little salvos of words that come my way. I will see an interesting looking person on a train or in a supermarket, and I'll ask myself, what makes that person's face so interesting to me? Is it the creases on the forehead? Is it the look of the eyes? Is it the cut of the hair? And these are things that they get stowed away. So I do have downtime. That is time when I'm not writing, but I don't know that it's ever really down. Okay, Rochelle Weber. Rochelle, I recognize you. You mentioned writing in the morning and then sometimes going back and reworking in the afternoon. Do you let your manuscripts simmer for a month or more and then go back and rewrite? Rochelle, I firmly believe a wonderful novelist who I knew many years ago, she's since passed, named Diana Chang, once said to me, Mark, writing is really rewriting. And I think that's very true. And I never knew how true it was until the last couple of years. Yes, I sometimes am working on two novels, not simultaneously, but I'll go from one to another and then 4, 5, 6 weeks later go back to the first, and I'm appalled at what I've written. It's so bad. It's so clumsy and crude, and I can't believe that I thought it was good. And I think this happens probably with every writer because in the moment when you're there and you're in that moment and you're expending that energy and you feel whatever it is the character's feeling, and I feel what these characters feel. Well, you may not have the clarity of vision you might otherwise have a month later down the track. And I think it's a very worthwhile thing to put any novel on the back burner, give it some time, do something else, or turn to another novel if you've got one going, or turn to some other project or something else in your life and come back to it and see what you've done and be prepared to be disappointed and to rework it. And if you don't love what you're doing, if you don't, to quote Steve Berry, you gotta write what you love. And if you love what you write, the chances are it'll be good. At least it'll come from the heart. And coming from the heart, it can't be all that bad. And going back is a very valuable thing, going back with a fresh eye and having given the manuscript time to cool down and let the smoke dissipate. That's Rochelle Weber. I know you, Rochelle. When I say I know you, we've gone back and forth a few times. I think on Twitter or let's see, Mary Primorak, having a hard time submitting questions. What university would you suggest to prepare for a career in forensic psychiatry? Well, first you got to go to medical school, become a physician, and then you have to go for a psychiatric residency, which is a 4-year deal. And you got to first become a psychiatrist, which involves the training and the education and the hands-on involvement with patients under the supervision of in a good psychiatric residency. Then you can go on to specialty training in forensic psychiatry, which, by the way, is, for anyone who may not know, is the application of psychiatry to the law. There are forensic elements in almost every profession. There's forensic accounting, there's forensic anthropology, just as Kathy Reichs. And there's forensic psychiatry, there's forensic internal medicine and pathology and so forth. Cyril Weinig, I think is his name, is a forensic pathologist, and he's on TV all the time. So you have to become a physician and then go into psychiatry and then take specialty or subspecialty training in forensic psychiatry. There is an American board now of forensic psychiatry, and there's no substitute for experience. And by experience, I mean my more than 3 decades of having evaluated people involved in litigation, in lawsuits, in criminal and civil matters, having testified, having evaluated people forensically, having prepared detailed written reports and tending an opinion to the court, one that you are prepared to defend and justify in a court of law under the rigors of a cross-examination, which I can tell you has got to be one of the most difficult things in the world. There was a time when I think I walked around with blood pressure that was sky high, but after a while, like many things, you get used to it. Rhonda Laney wants to know, do you read reviews? I try not to, Rhonda. But I end up invariably being drawn to them. I think if you've done the labor of love, and I think every author probably lives to please readers. Gee, it sounds so corny and it sounds so, I don't know. There's nothing. There's a thrill um, in providing pleasure and entertainment to people who will read something and hopefully enjoy what you've created, what you've done, what you've thought of, the ebb and flow that's come from your mind, from your world, from your experiences, from a new world that you've created and given over to people. And there can be an enormous pleasure in reading a positive review and in your knowing as an author that you've written something that provided entertainment or pleasure. And there's nothing greater than hearing a reader say or write down on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or elsewhere, I couldn't put this book down. That really makes my day. On the other hand, you try to avoid the mortification of a lousy one-star review, and they come. I don't care who you could be Shakespeare, you're going to get some one-star reviews. I had a one-star review on Mad Dog House that really bowled me over. It was 1 star, and it was a very brief review. And it was a woman who said, "I could tell on page 1 this wasn't my kind of read, so I put it down." And yet she gave it 1 star. She didn't even get beyond the first page. And I said, "My God, how unfair that is! She's dragging my average down." But it goes with the territory. If you're putting yourself out there as an author, you have to be prepared for the worst and hopefully for some good that comes your way in the way of reviews. What do you prepare to, Karen Terry, what do you prepare to write what do you prepare to write do you drink tea? Okay. I drink coffee. I tried to give up coffee a lot of years ago, and I lasted about a year. And I'm back on coffee now. I probably consume 6 or 7 cups a day. Um, I have a caffeinated look sometimes. Uh, I drink coffee. There's that morning sojourn of mine where I get into this realm, this writing realm of mine at 5:30, quarter to 6, whatever. It's accompanied by 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee, and I feel the rhythm. I get into a kind of writing rhythm, and I feel a kind of upsurge, an upticking in creativity, and it's a great way to begin the day for me, and it makes my day. It's such a positive beginning, and I think for me, coffee is part of that. I don't smoke, I don't drink alcohol. I gave that up 20 years ago, but I drink coffee. And I recently read that coffee can keep you alive longer. It's good for the heart and for your whole cardiovascular system. So what the heck, why not? Don't drink tea, I drink coffee, and lots of it. Paula Brewer Franklin, I keep running out of room on my bookshelves. Do you have a home library? And if so, how many books do you have in it? And do you ever weed them out to add others? Well, what a great question. Well, I moved to where we live now about 25 years ago. And at that time, I had a very large apartment in New York City, and I had a library. And it was floor to ceiling books, end to end, a 15, 16-foot long room. I had well over 1,000 books there. And when we bought this little country cape up in the hills in Connecticut, we didn't have the wall space to put in those kinds of bookshelves. There were some bookshelves. We put in a few more. So I didn't toss them out. I donated them to various libraries. And I find myself periodically doing that. I do donate books to my local library. And I think it's something I love to do. And I do get new books occasionally. I must confess, uh, I have run out of bookshelves, and it's really a matter of replacing books with new ones. When I interview an author, such as Barry Eisler or Raymond Curry or Andrew Gross or Steve Berry, I get a book, and that ends up replacing a book that I already have. But I do read on Kindle, so that saves me a lot of shelf space. And for me, at this point, the Kindle is a matter of necessity for a couple of reasons. One is my eyes; I can adjust the font, and two is I don't have any more book space. So the answer is yes, I do replace books, and I have to give some away, and it's always a tough task. There are some I will keep no matter what. Scott Turo's Presumed Innocent, Philip Roth's American Pastoral, Don Winslow's Savages, Barry Eisler's John Rain series. That's Rain. Um, BookTrib says this has been a wonderful chat. Mark, please announce tonight's lucky winners of Love Gone Mad: Marjorie Takala, Darlene Peterson, Mina DeCaro, Mary Primorak, and Rhonda Laney. You have won Love Gone Mad. Don't go mad.